On March 2, 1962, Philadelphia center Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a single NBA game against the New York Knicks. It remains the most staggering individual achievement in basketball history. And if you want to watch it happen, you can't. There is zero video footage of this game. We only have an audio recording of the fourth quarter and a few still photographs. In the early 1960s, television broadcasting was still severely limited. Cameras were bulky, expensive to operate, and mostly restricted to broadcasting in their immediate local markets. A game played in Hershey, Pennsylvania, simply didn't reach a national audience. To understand those limitations, we must look at the very first experimental sports broadcast in 1939. NBC set up a single camera on a wooden stand overlooking a baseball doubleheader between Columbia and Princeton. It was a proof of concept, beaming a fuzzy, static wide shot to a handful of experimental TV sets in New York. For the next decade, athletic competition remained a distinctly local experience. You either bought a ticket to sit in the bleachers, or you read about the result in the newspaper the next morning. Television had the technology to show pictures, but it hadn't yet figured out how to turn a game into a shared national event. Early networks were desperate for cheap, compelling content, but they needed sports that actually fit on small screens and required very little camera mobility. Boxing was the perfect solution. By 1948, programs like Friday Night Fights became massive primetime successes because the action was neatly contained inside a tiny, brightly lit ring. Baseball soon followed. The 1947 matchup between the Yankees and the Dodgers became the first televised World Series. While the broadcast only reached a few Eastern markets, it put Jackie Robinson's historic integration of the major leagues on a highly visible stage. But the true turning point arrived with the 1958 NFL championship between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants. The game was tied at the end of regulation, forcing the first sudden death overtime in NFL playoff history. A massive national audience stayed glued to their screens, captivated by the raw, unscripted tension of the final drive. Viewers needed guides through this new medium, relying on the steady, masterful voices of broadcasters like Vin Scully. Scully spent decades calling Dodgers games, teaching an entire generation how to follow the rhythm of baseball on television through his calm, descriptive play-by-play. That 1958 football championship proved something invaluable to network executives. Live sports generated a kind of raw, unpredictable drama that carefully written sitcoms simply couldn't manufacture. The networks realized they had a gold mine on their hands, and they rapidly poured money into new technologies to capture the thrill. The 1960s brought a rapid explosion of broadcast innovation. The shift to full-color television in the latter half of the decade finally brought the vibrant greens of the field and the bright, contrasting team uniforms directly into American living rooms, making the viewing experience infinitely more immersive. Then, during the 1963 Army-Navy game, director Tony Verna introduced a new concept: instant replay. By immediately rewinding and re-airing a crucial moment, broadcasters gave viewers the power to analyze the pace, strategy, and minute details of a play right after it happened. Meanwhile, the physical limitations of broadcast cables were vanishing. By the mid-1960s, networks began using newly launched orbiters to bounce signals off a satellite and back down to Earth. For the first time, a live event happening in Europe could be broadcast instantly across North America. Producer Rune Arledge capitalized on this global reach by launching Wide World of Sports in 1961. Hosted by Jim McKay, the anthology program gathered obscure, international events, from cliff diving to track and field, and packaged them into a cohesive weekly narrative about human endurance. Within a single decade, broadcast technology effectively erased the geographic borders of competition. You no longer had to live near the stadium to see the action. The living room television had become the gateway to global events. But live TV is inherently dangerous, a lesson NBC learned the hard way in 1968. During a fiercely contested game between the Oakland Raiders and the New York Jets, the broadcast reached its scheduled end time. With 1 minute left on the clock, NBC executives cut the feed to play a scheduled movie, Heidi. Off-camera, the Raiders scored 2 dramatic touchdowns in the final 65 seconds to win the game. Viewers across the country flooded the network's phone lines in pure rage. The Heidi Game disaster proved that sports were entirely unique, Their unscripted nature meant standard television schedules had to bend to the game, never the other way around. Heading into the 1970s, networks stopped fighting the unpredictability and fully embraced the spectacle. ABC elevated the NFL from weekend daytime programming into a primetime entertainment juggernaut with the launch of Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football required a new kind of voice, which they found in Howard Cosell. Cosell abandoned the traditional passive play-by-play style. Instead, he brought an abrasive, highly opinionated approach to the booth, turning the broadcaster himself into a polarizing character. By the late 1970s, the entire ecosystem had expanded. The bright lights of primetime, the manufactured drama of the broadcast, and the massive personalities calling the plays were now just as vital to American culture as the final score. The public appetite for sports programming grew so massive that in 1979, the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network launched. Dedicating an entire cable channel to 24-hour sports coverage was viewed as a colossal financial risk. Instead, ESPN proved that broadcasting athletics had evolved into a massive, self-sustaining industry. This 40-year evolution reached its absolute apex 1 year later at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. When the United States hockey team upset the heavily favored Soviet Union, millions of Americans were watching the tape-delayed primetime broadcast. Announcer Al Michaels famously asked, "Do you believe in miracles?" "Yes." He articulated the nation's shock, grounding Cold War tension in 20 college kids' success. In 40 years, the medium evolved from a single lens on a wooden stand to a global engine for live storytelling. By merging satellite technology with these iconic voices, television had taken isolated athletic events and scaled them into the massive, synchronized spectacles that now define the American calendar.